Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's broadcast from the Marin Symphony. My guest this week is Zachariah Spellman, who's been the Marin Symphony's tuba player since 1980, if you can believe it. So now 40 years as our principal tuba. He's also principal tuba for the San Francisco Opera Orchestra, and it's my pleasure to welcome him to our broadcast this week. Hi, Zach. How are you?
Hello, Alasdair. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you too. So I'll open as I have all of these broadcasts by asking you how you are doing in the midst of COVID, particularly since this would normally be quite a busy season for you with the summer programs at the San Francisco Opera. How are you dividing up your time these days?
I'm dividing up my time as I always have by starting in the morning with long tones. It's been a part of my life for so long that I don't know what I would do without it. I need that moment first thing in the morning to just reflect on what I sound like in the moment. So it's very mindful, it's very much in the present, and it reminds me what a miracle it is to be alive and to be able to have another day. And then these days, as you say, we're not in rehearsals at the opera house or performances. We're not indoors much at all except at home. And so many times I take the opportunity to open up my sound. I take my tuba for a walk to Stern Grove, which is in my neighborhood. I'll sit up on the stage and play for the trees or the dog walkers or whatever kind of life form happens to be there. And sometimes I'll find other places around town where I can play to the people that I live with. And for example, just the other day I went to 440 Davis Court, which is on the Embarcadero. It's a residence tower, and I have a senior friend who lives there, and I called him on the phone and I said, Dale, I'm down below on Washington Street. Why don't you come out on the balcony? I'd like to serenade you. And he said, wait a minute, Zach, just a second. I'm going to call some of my neighbors and give me a couple of minutes because they all want to come out and hear you too. And so I do these, I like to fondly refer to as acts of musical terrorism.
I was just going to frame it slightly differently. The phrase that came to my mind was random act of kindness. I think that's it's a very beautiful thing. And I'm wondering if you have any anecdotes that people stop you, or do they sort of look askance at you and move on, or sit in rapt attention? Do you have any interesting responses from those people that are listening and watching?
Most recently, probably the most interesting response was when I was practicing at Stern Grove out in the stands, if you will, and there were a lot of people gathering on the stage wearing white gowns and caps and going through the process of graduating. And they had a reaction to me that was not favorable because I was messing around, just improvising, and they were trying to do something that was very formal, very ceremonial. And I couldn't help but notice the very tinny sound of a recorded version of Elgar's Pomp and Circumstance. And it was in a key that I could relate to, so I very quietly played along and then increased the sound, pushed the sound up against the back of the stage behind all those kids, a ways from where I was. And at first I could tell the body language as they turned around and looked at me, and they were, and then they were, no, wait, listen to what he's playing. You could just read their thoughts, And so they one after another came and accepted their diplomas. And when it was all done, I played the triumphal march from Aida. And they all clapped, and many of them came over and thanked me, and they wanted to pay me. And I'm just practicing. Don't pay me in this thing. That was one of the more interesting encounters. There was also a group of for an AA meeting that I played Amazing Grace for. I have a wonderful theme and variations on Amazing Grace for solo tuba that includes polyphonics, singing and playing the tuba at the same time. And I love mystifying people with these special effects.
I think we have to redub you Zachariah Spellman, the Pied Piper of Stern Grove. So well done you. Listen, so what drove you to the tuba in the first place? Was it a happy accident? Was it intentional? Tell us your origin story, if you could.
My origin story.
Origin story, or your orange story.
Gosh, you're asking me, why did I choose the tuba? Is that what you're asking me?
Or did the tuba choose you?
It chose me, I'm afraid so. Well, I had no business being in Lee Weatherford's bedroom, but I was fascinated by this large, shiny instrument. He was getting a singing lesson from my mother. And I walked into his room, and I looked up at this big, shiny, brass, concave shape, and I could see myself being distorted in its reflection. And somehow that sousaphone toppled over and swallowed me whole. And when I was ejected from, this place that I had no business being in, well, I knew that was what I was going to be. I was going to be a tuba player, and that was when I was in the 3rd grade, and Lee was in the 4th grade, and he already was playing in the band at Cherry Park Elementary School. That's where it all started, anyway. It's a really sad story for where it goes from there.
Is it all downhill?
Well, the thing is that I grew up in a very musical and very competitive household with parents who were opera singers. They were television personalities and radio personalities in the city of Portland, Oregon. And I have 3 younger brothers, and we would all just compete against each other constantly for time to practice or time for attention. There was a lot of that,
Mm-hmm.
And my parents really didn't like the idea of me being a tuba player. You can understand that, of course. They wanted me to be a legitimate musician, Alasdair. Come on.
Or an opera singer.
They wanted me to be a conductor. They wanted me to be a famous pianist or something that people would respect and appreciate.
You find the tuba is the Rodney Dangerfield of the orchestra world?
I get no respect. No respect.
Well, you'll always get respect from me. You know that. So your story ended up in San Francisco, and you joined the San Francisco Opera Orchestra. So at least your parents must have been happy that you had some connection to opera. But this was even before.
Finally saw the light. They saw the light when they realized, yes, indeed, actually, our son can make a living as a tuba player, which didn't seem likely at first, but things worked out well.
And that was in 1977, is that correct? You were mentioning?
That is correct.
Wow. So you've really been...
That was before Davy's Symphony. I'm sorry to interrupt, Alasdair. I'm famous for interrupting. Just ask my wife, Susan. This was before Davy's Symphony Hall. Right. And the orchestra, the symphony, did the opera and the ballet. I mean, there was a lot of mixing and matching. And it wasn't until Davy's Symphony Hall was built that there was actually a definition of these orchestras. And those were very different days. And I managed to get a position with the San Francisco Ballet. And then I was offered a position with the opera. And there were some conflicts that I had to deal with that I had to make some decisions about. And it was just a miracle that it worked out.
Yeah. So, I used to live for about 4 years on Green Street in San Francisco on Russian Hill. And so I'm familiar with a particular band that you play in of a very unusual nature, the Green Street Mortuary Band. And I'm wondering if you could share a little bit about that experience, because it's not your average band. And so for those that don't know something of the legend around this extraordinary institution, I'd love you to fill them in.
What do you know about the history of the Green Street Mortuary Band?
Well, it's been around for something like 120 years.
That's correct.
And it plays for funerals in Chinatown, right? There's a procession that goes through North Beach, which is, of course, San Francisco is right adjacent to Chinatown, and that you are part of that band.
Being a self-employed freelance musician, I'm on many people's lists when they need a tuba player to fill a role. And I'm very honored and privileged to be on the list for the band at Green Street Mortuary. One never knows who's going to show up for these calls. There's no predicting when somebody is going to die, and the family is going to pay respects to them with a parade around their community. Most of the people who have this service for them are members of that community. And it's Christian hymns for a military band that we play and lead the procession of the cars, the motorcade, before they bid their final farewell. The parade stops and everybody bows 3 times to the deceased, and money is thrown left and right for the next life, and a big ceremony, a very solemn final hymn that we play. And sometimes we'll do 2 or 3 in a day if it's that time of year.
That's such a fascinating, almost kind of an only in San Francisco kind of thing, these mixture of cultures, and but I think like a very unique and beautiful thing.
You pointed out that it's been around for 120 years, and it was pretty much started by the Chinese community, and they wanted workers, they wanted the musicians who are laborers to play for them. It was very important they were able to do that, and I think that's a valuable thing for us as well, to share that culture.
Absolutely, absolutely. You are a man of an impressive array of gifts, musical and otherwise, and I happen to know the other instrument that you play because you and I have collaborated together in this regard, although not in public. But you are also a very adept harmonica player. How did that come about?
That's a good question. I've always liked the sound of the harmonica. I like the fact that it's easy to carry. You can always have one with you no matter where you are, which is not so easy with a tuba. No. And one day I was on a tour of San Francisco schools, and in the Mission District, there was a little pamphlet or flyer taped or nailed to a telephone pole or light pole, and it said harmonica lessons, and the phone number you could tear off, all these different phone numbers. And I thought, I've always wanted somebody who really knew what they were doing show me how to play the harmonica. So I tore off the phone number and called, and took 2 years of lessons. And wow, what a treat that was to be able to figure out how to bend notes and play in different keys, and actually play a concerto for blues band and orchestra, which you conducted.
That's right. And I had no idea before we set about doing that, that you played the harmonica at all, let alone played it extremely well. So that was that came out totally from left field. I thought, wow, there's a lot to this Zachariah Spellman now I'm seeing. So
yes, there's an inner rage that burns in me that I just can't express myself with words as well as I'd like to. And I need to have an instrument handy to get that out of my system.
And what better
right, Susan? Isn't that right? Oh, my wife puts up with me with the most amazing bursts of sound. You know what our song is, Alasdair?
What?
Susan and I have a song. It's a Requiem by Giuseppe Verdi. She was in the chorus, I was in the orchestra, our eyes met, and we knew we were meant to be partners, and that was in 1978. And we got to play our song in Carnegie Hall.
Nice, nice. So you met through a Requiem Mass. That's
Exactly.
How romantic is that? Now, speaking of your wife, and you and I were just chatting before we started rolling, the very impressive shirt that you're wearing is her doing.
Right down to the buttons. You'll notice that the buttons are like the caps on valves of brass instruments. She found these wonderful buttons and this fabric and designed it and made it for me, and it makes me feel very special when I put it on.
As well it should. It's a unique and a beautiful thing. Tuba pride all the way.
That's it.
Now, this has been so wonderful to spend this time chatting with you, but you've also, in addition to that, very generously shared your musical prowess with us in the form of a little piece that you put together separately. So would you like to tell us a little bit about that?
You know, Bill Withers wrote this song, Ain't No Sunshine, and it's like when you're young, your people that worry about you tell you, they caution you, now you're going out, well, you better put on a coat and get a hat. If it rains, have an umbrella, and you just want to say, I know, and you look both ways when you cross the street, and don't talk to any strangers. I know. Well, these days, they're saying things to me like, oh, you're going out? Well, you better put on a mask and get some gloves. Make sure you wash your hands. I know. And, you know, look both ways when you cross the street, and don't talk to strangers. All right, so this song has 26 of those, I know. And I want you to be singing along at the right time. I know. Let's hear it.
Zach, thank you so much for this. It's been a blast. My only regret is that we can't do that in person, but I'm so glad to be able to connect with you over Zoom today, and for you to be connecting with our viewers and our listeners. So big hugs to you, and look forward to seeing you sometime soon.